Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't already watched the previous video on setting up a basic HTTP server on a VPS, you'll need to go back and watch that first. I'll put a link to that in the description below. This is a continuation of that video, and we're going to now continue on and set up a SSL certificate on the server. I have already gone ahead and configured a domain name yt.hostvision.com, but until we configure an SSL certificate, this domain name will not work. The reason is my domain name hostvision.com has HSTS preload set up. So what it is the browser Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer and so forth know my domain name requires an SSL certificate and they enforce it. You can also do this by specifying the header strict transport security when you configure Nginx to be served out. But I've gone one step further and I've had my domain name preloaded into the browsers. This means that in order for the domain to work, we need a SSL certificate. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a free certificate from Let's Encrypt. Now, Let's Encrypt provide 90-day certificates. They are free. We can automate them just like it says here. It's an automated and it's an open certificate authority that is recognized by all major browsers. This is great. This means that even the average person that doesn't have any budget for hosting or has very little budget for hosting doesn't have to go and purchase an SSL certificate to get proper security. And a lot of major sites are using it. If you ever use Cloudflare, you'll actually find that a lot of the Cloudflare certificates, I believe, are signed by Let's Encrypt as well. So it's a secure and commercially available certificate. It's still not basically a what they call a high security certificate because it doesn't certify your company and you as actually being by your company, but it certifies that you own and control your domain before it gives you one. So what we're going to do is we're going to install on the server this package. This is a excellent, very small, very slim program or package that maintains the certificates on the server. So when they're getting close to expiry, what it does is a cron job runs every day, and it would check if the certificate is going to expire within 30 days. And if it does, it will reissue a new certificate for your server. And we can tell it to restart Nginx or reload Nginx with the new certificate each time this happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this to install it. Because we're on a Debian system, by default, it comes with wget installed. We have no need to install curl. So we'll use wget to retrieve the script. Now, to explain this command, it's very simple. Obviously, the program's wget. The O switch tells it where to output the content of what it downloads. By specifying a hyphen, we're going to tell it to output the file to the console to standard out. Then, of course, we specify the URL to retrieve. And because we're outputting the content of that script to the console, we can pipe that into shell, into SH, which will then execute whatever it downloads. Now, this can be dangerous. I've already verified the content, and the fact that this provider's hosting it again via HTTPS protects us from man-in-the-middle attacks. So we're pretty safe to run this. But before this will function, we need to make sure the server is able to verify certificates. Because I built a very bare bones virtual machine, it doesn't have the root certificates on it and it cannot validate certificates. So what we first need to do is go across to our virtual machine, which I'll connect into here. And then what we need to do is install the package Ssl Certificates. And this is just the root certificates for the system. So you'll see now in etc SSL certs that we have all our root certificates, and a big long list of them. There's actually quite a few, and the certificate chains. So now we're able to go and execute this. So we'll copy that and paste this in. Okay, so it's recommending we use SOCAT. We haven't installed that yet. So we can continue without it, but we're actually going to follow its recommendation and use it. SOCAT is a nice little socket application. It's like cat, but over sockets. So install SOCAT. That's done. Now, I've already configured the domain yt.hostvision.com to point to this server's IP address. We can verify that using NS lookup. that's not installed. We need to install DNS Utils, DNS Tools, I think it is, sorry. It's DNS Utils without a hyphen. Okay, so now we can go ns lookup, and we want to check that the domain entry is there. So we're looking for yt.hostvision.com, which you can see there, that resolves to our IP address here. So that's perfect. We need that because Let's Encrypt is going to try and connect to that domain and look for files placed there by the Acme.sh package. And it's going to use that to verify that we have control and we own the domain. So we'll exit out of that. Now, we've installed Acme, but we don't have access to it yet. You actually need to source its environment variables. You could add this to the profile, but it's something that's only going to be used once in a blue moon, so there's sort of no point. So if we go source in the home directory, we have an Acme directory now. And then in that directory, you'll see we've got an acme.sh.env. So by sourcing that file, we now have the Acme tools on the path. So we can run Acme, as you can see, autocomplete found that file. So the next step is now to obtain a certificate for the domain. So if we go back to the browser, this guide's actually very simple, very good. If we just go down here to just issue a cert, we're going to issue multiple certs because we want to cover, sorry, no, we're not. I'm thinking of a primary site. If you were running, say, well, in this case, example.com, you would want to issue a cert for both domains, example.com and www.example.com, so it covers both, and continue to add whatever extra domains on there that you're going to want to cover for your domain. You also need to specify the web root directory. In our case, it'll be home, YT, public HTML. So what's going to happen is Acme is going to create a file in that, a directory inside your public HTML directory called, I believe it's, I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll see it in a minute, but it creates a directory in there that is going to put some files in there for the Acme services to pick up. So we're going to issue a certificate for this site. So we go acme.sh issue. Sorry, I have not switched that over to the terminal. I'll back that out and switch it over. So we're going to go Acme issue. The domain is yt.hostvision.com. And the web root is in home, YT, public HTML. So if we run that and wait, it's going to create a new account with them. It's now verifying the domain is on this server. It's now signing a certificate. And there you go. There's our signed certificate. And you can see it's installed, that it's telling us where it's put it, etc. That's not all we have to do. We still have to configure Nginx with it, and we have to give it to Nginx. But if we have a look in home YT public HTML, you'll see in here we now have, oh no, it's removed it. There would have been a temporary directory in here, I believe. I can't remember the name. It starts with a period. It's a hidden directory, but we said list all, so we should have seen it if it was there. It won't come back to what the directory name is, but it doesn't really matter. For the purpose of this is we now have a valid signed certificate that's got an expiry, I believe, of 90 days or 60 days or something. So if we go back to, again, the browser, our guide here on acme.sh also tells us how to install a cert into Apache or Nginx or whatever. In our example, we want to use Nginx. So we're going to follow this instruction. So we're going to tell it what certificate we're going to install, and we need to specify just the primary domain. So if you've got multiple here, say www.example.com and so on, you don't need to specify that. You only need to specify the primary one, the first one you entered when you created a certificate. The key file, this is the private key. This must be kept secure. This is telling it where to put it on your file system. The full chain file. You'll notice for Apache, we actually specify a cert file and a full chain file. Nginx doesn't support having them separate. and it really doesn't need to. So we have to use full chain, and that's just a combination of the actual certificate that was generated as well as the intermediate certificates from Let's Encrypt that are needed to verify the certificate. And then we tell Acme that whenever this certificate is updated, to reload Nginx. So what we're going to do is basically use this and put a certificate into the right location. If we go back to the terminal, you'll see here it has told us where these certificates are on the system, but it's highly advised not to use these certificates here because Acme needs to manage them, and it's where it keeps them and tracks and maintains them. And you may not see a certificate update when it's updated by cron if you try and use these directly. So we're going to use the recommended instructions in the guide, and we'll go Acme.sh, install cert. The domain is yt.hostvision.com. The key file is going to be in etc nginx ssl. I haven't made that directory yet. We'll create that in a second. This will fail until I create that directory, but even still, Nginx SSL, and we're going to call this, this is my preference. I like to name the certs by what they are. So this is yt.hostvision.com, and this is the key. Then we're also going to say full chain file, same deal, etc nginx ssl yt.hostvision.com. This one's the chain, so we're going to say, or certificate, so we're going to say cert for certificate. And then we're going to say reload command is service nginx force reload. You could use systemctl, or if it's an init server, whatever, you just got to give it the appropriate command to reload nginx. So like I said, this is going to not work. So what I'll actually do is we'll just Control C and abort that. We'll ignore that. And we'll make that SSL directory. We'll also secure it so only Nginx has access to it. So first we'll change its permissions to owner is, or the user is read, write, execute. Now, obviously I'm using the long notation here. I'm not using octal. If I was to do this using octal, it would be chmod 700. But for new users, this might be an easier way to do it. So I'm going to use the long format of the permission system. So the user is read, write, execute. Group is nothing. We don't want to allow the Nginx group to access it. Or in this case, sorry, it's the www data group. So read, write, execute for the user. The group is nothing, and everyone else is nothing. You could actually say A equals 0, which means all is nothing. But for this example, we're going to be explicit. So now if we list the details of that directory, you'll see here for SSL, our permissions, only the user has read, write, execute. Now when Nginx launches the first time, or Nginx, the master process, it runs as root, it'll have access to this anyway, no matter what the permissions are on this. So we don't really need to change its group or anything. This should be enough. So we'll go back and we'll copy this. And this won't be in the history because I hit Control C and cancelled the command. We'll paste that in and we'll run that. So now it's installed the certificates into the directory and it's reloaded Nginx, but we haven't yet told Nginx to use a certificate, so it won't be effectual yet. But if we have a look in etc nginx ssl, you'll see we now have the two files, and you can see the Acme certificate has already protected the key by making sure that only the owner is able to read or write the file, and the owner is root. So what we now need to do is add our Ssl configuration to Nginx. So we'll go back into the sites available, and we'll look at the file we created in the previous guide, which is yt.conf. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Nginx actually supports specifying the SSL server in the same configuration bracket. Actually, before I continue, I'm going to change our Vim syntax highlighting so it's easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. We do that by editing etc vim rc.local. Again, this is a file that Debian will look for. It doesn't exist initially. And if it's there, it'll load it into Vim. We do it this way just like we did with Nginx with sites available and so forth, so that if Vim is upgraded, it doesn't complain and doesn't have a clash with configuration. So we'll create that file. And in here, we're going to go set background equals dark. This is my preference. Set no wrap. I don't like it to wrap. These are just my basics. I actually do have some other preferences I normally put on each server, but for this guide, this will do. So now if we look at yt.conf and I do some highlighting and stuff, you can actually see that now. It's not putting white over it. No wrap's handy too because I'm in a restricted width here for the use of recording, and we don't want to wrap long lines and make it extremely hard to read. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add the configuration needed for Nginx to listen on port 443, which is the default SSL port. So we're going to say listen 443. This is going to be SSL, and this is also going to be the default server for this port. So now we need to specify the Ssl certificate paths. So what I'm going to do is use another server as a reference because I don't remember these off the top of my head exactly. Plus also I have a list of certificates that I allow, ciphers I allow and disallow for increased security. And it's a big nasty long list, so it's easy just to copy and paste. So off screen, I'm going to connect to another server. I'm sorry, I can't show you this. Okay. So we're listening on the 443 port. We also need to, like I say, specify the certificate. So it's Ssl Certificate. And the certificate file is in etc nginx ssl. Now this is the full certificate, but in our case it's the like Acme's already done that for us, so we can just go yt.hostvision.com.crt. We also need to specify the key, so Ssl Certificate Key. Now I'm a stickler for format. I like my code to, not just code, but my configurations to be easy to read. It makes it easy to manage them in the future. So you'll often see me do that and go back and sort of realign things in my config as I go. In the long term, it makes things a lot easier, while it only takes a few seconds now to do it correctly. So what I'm going to do now is specify that certificate key. We are also, like, this should be enough, but like this will get us going with a default set of certificates, but I'm also going to limit the protocols and ciphers for security. So we're going to go SSL protocols, and we're going to go for TLS v1.1, TLS v1.2, and we're not going to do TLS 1.3 because this version of Nginx and OpenSSL on this server does not yet support TLS version 1.3. I do have a version and a repository that contains updated versions for Debian 9, but this example is designed to be fairly generic and global, so I'm not going to include that in this configuration. So our next step is to specify the cipher list on the server we're going to support. The Ssl Ciphers. Now, you can do your own research on the list of ciphers to use and so forth. I'm going to just paste in a list of ciphers that I prefer. And you can see there, because we specified no wrap, this hasn't made a mess on the screen and sort of caused us any issues. If we go set no wrap, you'll be able to see, hold on, I'm going to save, set wrap, sorry. You'll be able to see the entire list. But to keep this clean, we go set no wrap. This is obviously Vim commands. Now, we also have to tell it to prefer the server's cipher list. Otherwise, the client will provide a list and the server will go, and it might use a certificate the client has specified. We don't want to allow that because the client might specify a downgraded or a weak cipher. So go SSL prefer server ciphers on. Again, I'm going to fix my formatting. We also want a Ssl Session Cache for performance. This allows it to reuse sessions that were already established in the past so that people don't have to renegotiate a SSL link every time they connect to the server if they already have an existing session. So what we do is we specify this Ssl Session Cache. It's a shared cache for SSL, and we're going to cache for 10 minutes. That should be plenty of time. We're also going to specify the SSL curve. Again, this is my preference for security. So ECDH curve. And that will be SECP 384R1. I believe it's right. ECDH, that's correct. That stands for elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. I believe that's off the top of my head, so I could be wrong there, but close enough. So now we also need to turn off session tickets for security. They can be abused. You may want to retain them for backwards compatibility with other systems, but in our instance, we don't care about them. We would rather security. We're also going to specify the strict transport security header. Like I said, my domain uses HTTP strict transport security, and as such, we must specify this header to keep the preload correct, or browsers that don't have us preloaded to tell them we don't want to use port 80 ever. We want to always be secure. So that's very simple. We just go add header. Strict, not script. The time, the max age, and in my case, I'm specifying a year. I believe it was a year. Anyway, that's in seconds, so it's 31536,000. Yep, that's correct. So I'm referencing another screen here you guys can't see for this config because, like I said, I don't remember all this off the top of my head. Don't think that I'm just magically pulling all these figures out because these are things that you'd be hard-pressed to remember when you're working on so many different systems. If you can, kudos to you. Anyway, we also need to tell it to include subdomains. Well, we don't really. We are the subdomain, but we'll keep it in there anyway for consistency because that's how I operate my domain. We're also going to tell it to preload. If you want details on what all of these arguments mean in this header, you need to look up, and you can go back to, we'll have a look here. This is a great article on it on Wikipedia. If you want, you can actually go and read the whole specification, the RFC spec. But if you want a good overview and a basics on what it does and what it's for and limitations, etc., I recommend you read this article through. But like I said, I'm not going to cover this because this is an entirely different topic. So what we're going to do now is go back to our terminal. And this is all we need for the configuration. But what we're also going to do is we want to enforce SSL is always going to be used. So we are going to create a separate server for port 80. Like I said, this would work as it is, but we want to redirect all the port 80 traffic to use HTTPS. So we're going to create another server. We're going to move the listen directive out of here and down into here. We also need to specify a server name. I forgot about that, sorry, because we now have a domain name. So if we go yt.hostvision.com, we're still the default server. So even if that's incorrect or it doesn't know where to send it, it's going to load this server, this site. So this one here, we're going to say listen on 80, the default server. Server name is yt.com. And then we're going to tell it to just redirect everything. We don't want to serve anything from this server. We just want to kick it across to HTTPS. That's very simple. We can just do a return to kick the traffic across. Now, if you want, give me 1 second. I'm going to verify the syntax on this. I believe it's just like return 301. I just need to double check. Yes, it is. Return 301. The HTTPS, because we're redirecting to secure. And we can use host because our host name is going to match the server name. Now, that could be dangerous. Some people don't recognize that the client has control over the variable host. So they could actually specify a different host header and cause a redirect to somewhere else. So what we're not going to use that. That's used in a lot of guides. In this case, it's probably safe to use it, but just for security and to be absolutely certain, we're going to specify explicitly the server name or the domain name. In our case, it's yt.hostvision.com. And then without a slash, because request URI already has a slash in it, we're going to specify the URI. The reason for that is if you go to the browser and you load in, say, yt.hostvision.com/whatever, this will redirect with that /whatever on the end. Otherwise, it'll just redirect to the root and people get redirected to a page they don't expect. It's just a little bit nicer that way. But that's all we need to do there. We don't need to specify a route or anything because it's just going to kick all traffic across to the secure host. For consistency, I'm also going to reorder this so that it's the same as the HTTP server as server name, and then all our certificate details, our route, etc. So we'll save this and quit, and we'll verify our config. So we go Nginx-T for test. Our config is successful. That also checks that it can read those certificates. So now if we reload the Nginx server, we should have full SSL support. So we go system, reload Nginx. Now if we switch back across to our browser, we go here. This should, when I refresh, kick us across to a secure site. Actually, this may not, because it's trying to. What's happened is we've forgotten to open up port 443 on the firewall. It's just going to sit and hang because it's trying to connect to a port that's dropping traffic. So we'll go back to our terminal. If we go to IP tables, you'll see here, we do not have a rule to allow import 443. So we need to add that. The command will be IP tables insert into the input chain. We're going to want to add it anywhere after basically the first rule. So for consistency, let's add it after the except for 80. So this will be index 1, 2, 3, 4. The protocol is TCP. The destination port is 443. And the jump target is accept. So now if we list our rules again, you'll see we have this extra IP tables rule in now for 443. And like last time, we need to save that. So a reboot puts our rule back. Otherwise, on a reboot, we'll basically break our site or our hosting setup. So we need to go net filter, persistent, save. So if we now go back to our browser, we'll try this again and reload. You'll see we got redirected to yt.hostvision.com. That was the 302 redirect on the port 80. And you'll see we also now have a secure connection. And if we bring up the server details, certificate details, you can see it's encrypted by Let's Encrypt, and we expire on the 8th of March 2019. You can go further and see all the specific details of that certificate if you like, but we're fully encrypted now, and you'll see our connection is strong. We're using that P384 elliptic curve key exchange that we specified. We're using TLS 1.2, so it's a strong protocol, and we're using a strong cipher. And if we use a service like SSL Labs test, analyze, and we'll go to there. This takes a little while. Test your server. And we'll put in here yt.hostvision.com and submit that. This will take a little bit because it's going to run through. It's going to try all the different protocols. It's going to try and test and see what ciphers are available. It's going to test for various bugs like heartbleed. You see we've already got some basic information. And you see it's already very happy with what we're doing. Got a lot of green there. But this will take a little while. And when that's done, we should have a grading probably of an A or an A+. I believe an A+ because we're doing the preload. While that runs, I'll take advantage of the time to remind everyone, all this information is provided free. I'm doing this in my spare time. I don't get paid for this. It does cost me time to do this, and the video editing and learning to do all of this, and the video mastering, audio mastering takes a fair amount of time to create. If you'd like to support my work, I will be placing my Patreon and PayPal link details in the description below. I don't expect people to donate or to subscribe or anything like that. I don't believe that it should be a requirement, and I don't monetize these videos either. I believe in fully open information and open source. There's so much stuff out there given away by developers, such as even like the Linux kernel itself. We need to specify a Diffie-Hellman key. But anyway, back on the other topic. I don't believe that all this information should cost, because so much of it already is given away for free, and I've learnt this information mostly for free, both through experience, through guides online, self-research, and self-teaching through other people's hard work. So this is my way of giving back. But if you'd like to support what I do and to cover my time for this, I'd love it if you could support me through Patreon or PayPal or something like that. Anyway, we see we've got some issues here with the key exchange, so we probably need to address that, but we're not going to do that in this video. You can see this will be why. It's because I've allowed TLS 1.1. Really, we should disable that. Not much requires it. It's actually going to tell us here that that's the weak keys. We're using a 1024-bit weak Diffie-Hellman. And this list here will tell us all the browsers we're compatible with, what works and what doesn't. So you can see what the browsers are choosing to use. And you can see down here, IE is deciding to use the weak key exchange. Typical. But everything else is using the strong key exchange, the SEP 384R1, SECP 384R1. If we go further down, you'll see that it's, again, complaining about that key exchange. But you'll see that again, DH complaining. But this is a very handy tool. You see the preload as well, that we're preloaded in all these browsers for the domain. So we really should fix that, but we're not going to on this instance. If you want to do that, you want to learn more information about this, there's tons of information on how to configure your SSL, tons of other guides out there, and we're not going to go into that. So we'll go back here and you'll see, like I said, we have a secure site. That's the end of the video for this episode. If you have any questions, like always, please place them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If there's anything complex that we've missed or glazed over, again, ask, and I'll try and cover it in the next video. Thank you once again for your time, and enjoy.